Dr. Benjamin Hubbard, who will speak on the topic of religion and medicine. He is a proven expert in the field, having taught religious studies at Cal State Fullerton for 25 years before becoming Professor Emeritus of Comparative Religion. In addition to his academic achievements, Dr. Hubbard is active in shaping interreligious dialogue in Orange County. He frequently contributes to newspapers like the LA Times and the Orange County Register. He is also the president of the Institute for Religious and Cultural Competency in Orange County. Now, Dr. Hubbard will speak about his current research on different healing practices across religions.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Now, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You're getting a little hungry. You've been at it all day. So I'll try to make this as interesting and valuable as I can. And I want to tell you right away that this is not the State of the Union address. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. This is just Ben Hubbard talking. And if you have questions, do not hesitate just to raise your hand in the middle. This is, in other words, I don't have to get through material before you actually ask questions. Anytime you have a question, just interrupt me. I mean, and we'll of course have a lot of time at the end for questions as well. And also, if you can't hear me, I think that the audio is quite good, but if you can't, just give me a little ear sign like this. But it sounds like we're in pretty good shape. This sound system really is quite good. So anyway, it's very nice to be here. This is my second year doing this, and it's really a privilege. It's given me a lot to think about and a lot of new ideas to work with, and I'm very indebted to Irene Velarde and to Janelle Miyashiro and Prani Sananiko and other people who helped me put this together. It's very much a team effort. So my hope is that I can make it clear to you that as you pre-med students, med students, pre-dent, pre-public health students begin to move into the world, that you realize that we are diverse in a whole bunch of different ways. We are diverse culturally, sexually, religiously, and ethnically, along with many other ways. That this country is a highly diverse nation, and you're going to be working in a world with all those diversities abounding. They're all there. And you can't become experts in every religion or every culture, but you can become knowledgeable. And furthermore, we live in a world where information is at your fingertips. Look at all of you right now with your smartphones and your tablets and laptops. You can go to Wikipedia, which, is, by the way, is a good place to start. It is not the place to end your research, but it's a good place to start. You can Google anything. You can Google things. I mean, it's all out there. What's Zoroastrianism? Well, type it in, and you'll know that there's a religion that very few people have heard about, but that is really a beautiful tradition coming out of Persia 4,000 years ago. So, you know, it's there. You can get it, and hopefully what I'm saying will be of some use. I want to give you some sense of the religious makeup of the country. Just kind of an overview. It's based on several quite wide-ranging surveys, actually. And you can see that Christians are still the predominant religion. And in fact, it could be said that even though this is a country that officially separates church and state, by way of the First Amendment, that the matrix of the country is Judeo-Christian. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a Christian or Jewish to be part of the discussion, but just that to appreciate things like the fact that Christmas is a national holiday, or that the words "in God we trust" are on the coinage, you've got to have some appreciation of the fact that the country comes out of this matrix. It doesn't mean you can't be an atheist. It doesn't mean that you can be all variety of other religions or no religion. It's just you have to appreciate this fact, be aware of it. Now, the issue, of course, is that there are all kinds of Christians. In fact, in the World Christian Encyclopedia says there are 35,000 different kinds of Christians. And Johnny Carson used to say, I didn't make that up. Okay? Now, of course, some of them are itsy-bitsy subdivisions of subdivisions, but religious diversity and plurality is a fact of our life, even within the Christian tradition. The predominant group today are more conservative, so-called evangelical or born-again Christians. People who tend to be rather conservative in their views on things like abortion, gay rights, opposition or suspicion of the teaching of evolution and so forth. But nonetheless, wonderful people with high moral values and within which you find a whole variety of views too. I mean, there's no lockstep that everybody believes the same way, even in a more conservative tradition like that. The other Protestant group that's in the picture, which used to be the principal group in terms of size, are mainline, so-called mainline or liberal Protestants. The word mainline used to work when they were the top dogs, as it were. But in the course of the last 40 or so years, there's been quite a shift. So 40 years ago, it was more like the 26% were mainline or liberal Christians, and the 18% were the more conservative Christians. So there's been quite a shift in this country in terms of the Protestant family of religions. Roman Catholics comprise almost 24%, but they're the largest single group. In other words, there's no Protestant group that is as large as the aggregate Roman Catholic. So about 1 in 4 Christians in the country are Roman Catholic, and about 40% of those are Latino. In fact, one of the reasons why the numbers of Catholics have remained as high as they have is because of Latino influx in this country now. We have now over 35 million Latinos in the country. And so the numbers are quite high. Another division given is historically black churches. Now, not all African American folks belong to an historically black church, but probably 75 or 80% of them do. And so that's another segment. We then come to Mormons, representing a little under 2%. We've heard a lot about Mormons, whose official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS, as I put in parentheses there, Latter-day Saints. The candidacy of Mitt Romney brought Mormons to the fore, although I must say that I just finished an article on press coverage of religion in the presidential election, and there wasn't really a lot of education about what Mormons believe in. Mormon doctrine is rather complex. Some people consider Mormons not to be Christian, but I think sociologically one has to say they are in the wider Christian family. They believe in Jesus Christ. They believe in the Hebrew Testament, the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, the New Testament. They have their own additional scriptures like the Book of Mormon, but certainly in the broadest sense they are Christian, even though they have some distinctive views. So, and they've been an important part of the American fabric in terms of what they've done as a country, as people of high cultural and moral standards. Jehovah's Witnesses are another group that's often put in a different category because they have some rather unusual views on the nature of God and Christ. And we're not going to get into that, but these are folks who are out there too, and sincere believers. Eastern Orthodox Christians are people like Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. Most of these folks are from Eastern Europe, Middle East, and so forth. And there's still a relatively small group of maybe 3 million Americans, but there's a beautiful Greek Orthodox church in Irvine, for example, some of you may have seen. So they're in the mix as well, and then there are other smaller Christian groups as well that we won't get into. So that's the crazy quilt of Christianity. Okay, now as far as other religions in the country, the numbers are fairly modest, but actually some of them are quite influential. The Jewish population is 5.1, 5.2 million, and yet Jews have been very prominent in government, in the professions and so forth, in Hollywood and the entertainment world. And so students are always surprised when I say, well, guess how many Jewish people are in the country? And most of them will say, oh, well, 20 million, for example. Well, no, it's closer to 5 million, but it's just that Jews have been prominent in a number of fields, and medicine included, and so their numbers seem higher than the actual fact. So there's Judaism, there's Islam. There's a lot of debate about how many Muslims there are in the country. The best estimates I can get are something around 3.5 to 4 million adherents, but that's a lot of people. And there are now mosques all over the country, and the number of Muslims are growing. The fact of Muslim growth is mainly tied to the reformation of immigration law in the 1960s, when the quotas that had been put on people from non-European countries were dropped. So we now have a sizable Muslim population. Buddhists, there are many Buddhists. There are a couple of hundred Buddhist temples in Southern California. There's the great Shilai temple up in Hacienda Heights, for example. And Buddhists have had a lot of influence, maybe disproportionate to their numbers, because so many people have plugged into Buddhist practices like meditation or Hindu yoga. both these religions, quite small as you can see, but they have introduced the West to practices that don't require you becoming a Hindu or a Buddhist. You can practice yoga, as you know, without converting to Hinduism, obviously. And you can practice meditation without becoming a Buddhist. I'm going to talk about meditation a little later in the talk. Okay, then there are some smaller groups. Wicca, which is the kind of nature-centered religion, which centered around the solstices of the year and very much nature-centered. Sikhism, some of you remember that several months back that a Sikh Gurdwara, or religious site in Wisconsin, was defamed by an individual who came in and killed 7 Sikhs for no other reason than they were different. And so, but there have been Sikhs in the Central Valley for 100 years. So, lovely people. They're the people that wear the turbans. The Baha'i faith is a monotheistic religion like Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's quite small, but high ethical standards, and very much in the monotheistic tradition. Started in Persia. Its religious center is in Haifa, Israel. I visited there several times, and it's a lovely, lovely place. And then we have other religions as well. Unitarians are people who, as the name implies, originally broke away from New England Puritan Congregationalist traditions and became beliefs in one God, but not a Trinitarian God. And now most Unitarians are actually secular humanists. They don't necessarily believe in God, but they're remarkable people in terms of their social justice concerns and so forth. Church of Scientology, you've heard a lot about lately. A rather controversial religion, but out there with all the rest. Okay, any questions? Okay so far? I'm running through this first part a little quickly because I want to get into the kind of the central focus of the concepts we're dealing with, but don't hesitate to stop me. Okay, worldwide, here are some numbers you can look at very quickly just to give you some sense of the numbers of religions. One of the surprises might be that Judaism only has 13 million members, most of them either in the United States, Canada, or Israel. Just to give you one little factoid, before the Holocaust in 1939, there were 17.5 million Jews in the world. Today there are 13 million. 6 million were lost in the Holocaust, and those numbers have not been recouped. And Judaism had taken a lot of hits along the way for the last 1,800 years as well. But nonetheless, the religion is thriving. Israel is a modern democracy, a high-tech democracy with medical facilities that are the envy of the world, even the envy of this country. The Baha'i faith, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is a Persian-based religion which has a kind of monotheistic concept, but it's also rather dualistic. There's a kind of there's one God, but there's a principle of evil that is sort of a quasi-God, and that's an awfully quick definition. But again, remarkable people. Most of them now live in India and are called Parsis after Persia. But they're a part of the landscape too. All of them right here in Orange County. We have everybody here. You don't have to go to LA. Just Orange County alone, you've got all these traditions right there amongst us. And then the Unitarians, whom we spoke about a minute ago. Okay.
Can I ask a question about
yes, sir.
the previous slide? Maybe the influence is bigger than the numbers, but to Native Americans, not in this one, the U.S. Religion. So I tend to think of Native Americans as religious. They have rituals, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's
No, that's a very good point. The question was about Native Americans. How do they fit in? Okay. The fact is that most Native Americans today have syncretized elements of Christianity and Native traditions. So they might call themselves Christian or not. Not all of them are that way. Some of them follow the Native tradition, but many of them have tried to, as I said, conjoin or syncretize elements of Christianity along with Native traditions as well. That the story of Native Americans in this country is a pretty sad story. There's no question about that. I've had some connections with Native Americans and their plight. There's so many of them suffering a lot. We tend to think that all Native Americans now are rich because of the casinos, but those casinos are just a tiny fraction of all the natives living in places like Navajo reservations in Arizona where there's great poverty. So they're there. I think the actual number ethnically of Native Americans in this country is about 2 million, which is a far cry from the over 20 million Native Americans that were here when Columbus encountered this continent. So it's been very difficult. Many Native Americans died because of smallpox. They didn't have immunity to smallpox. Of course, war, all kinds of problems. But anyway, that's the story. Thank you for the question. Other questions? That was a great question. Okay, so coping with the crazy quilt. Some of this will follow from what I've said. Obviously, awareness. You've got to be aware that you can't make assumptions that just because somebody's name is O'Reilly or Santucci that they're Catholic. Now, they may be Irish Catholic, an Italian Catholic, but they may have converted to Hinduism, or they may be a so-called nun. That's N-O-N-E. There was no religion. As a matter of fact, the most recent survey by the Pew Organization says that amongst people in your generation, about 30% are in the nun category. That is, they may be spiritual, they have ethical standards, they may have come out of a home that was Christian or Jewish or whatever. They don't belong to a church of any kind. In the country as a whole, the number is now about 20%. About 20% of Americans do not belong to a religious group. Now, the majority of them believe in God of some kind, but there is also a group of probably 6-7 million who are agnostic or atheists, who just don't have any belief in a higher power. But that's part of the whole spread of people. Open-mindedness, obviously. It's good to realize that every religion that I know of has a version of the golden rule, that do unto others, love your neighbor, or that which is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else. So that core, some of these core values of justice and love and treating the other person as you'd like to be treated are found in almost every tradition that I've ever studied. So in other words, you kind of have a common starting point. Now, there are vast differences, of course, but there are also some profound similarities. And we start with those. That's how we build a society. Respect. Remember that if you were to come from Mars, well, yeah, if there were a Mars, there were people on Mars, and you came here and said, well, I'm going to explain Christianity. Well, Christianity believes that Jesus of Nazareth was both God and man, and he was raised from the dead and ascended into heaven. Okay, fine. Or somebody else says, well, I'm a Jew, and I believe that Moses encountered God in a burning bush on Mount Sinai, and later on was able to lead the Israelites out of Egypt by commanding the waters to part of the Sea of Reeds, and then he received the commandments on Mount Sinai. Or that Muhammad received direct revelations from God, which he wrote down exactly as he was given them. You know, if you heard those things off just in cold, without any background, you might say, wow, you know, how can that be? Well, it can be because, you know, you grow up in a certain tradition and you become inculcated or imprinted with these teachings, and then as you grow older, you begin to criticize them or critique them, but you come away usually with, or you may come away not any longer believing, but you may come away thinking, well, okay, I get it, but you know, I can see how somebody else might consider my religion to be unusual or strange or whatever, because religion in the end involves faith. You just got to realize that. It's just an aspect of life. Religion and faith go hand in hand. Religious beliefs can be unique. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions, and yet some of them, and some of you med students and pre-med might know more about this than I do, but there are some Jehovah's Witnesses who now are saying that certain blood products, not just blood directly, might be available for blood transfusion or synthetic blood. Why do they feel this way? Well, there are passages in the Hebrew Scriptures, Old Testament, which say that blood is sacred to God, that blood signifies life, and life is sacred to God. Ergo, don't mess around with blood. In fact, Jewish people follow a kosher code whereby blood is drained completely from animals before the animal is consumed. In fact, not only is the blood drained out of the animal, but also it's then soaked in a saline solution to remove the last remnants of blood from the animal. So you have these traditions that are based on background. Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarians. And furthermore, they've gone back to worshiping on the Jewish Sabbath, namely on Saturday. Different, but part of their tradition. Of course, I mentioned kosher food laws. Muslims have a kind of kosher standard called halal, H-A-L-A-L, halal, which is not quite as strict as the Jewish standards, but it's still, quite demanding. And then there are, challenges that people face. You go on the Hajj, which is this pilgrimage which a Muslim is supposed to make once in his or her lifetime to Mecca. You're going to be in there. You're going to be making the Hajj with about 3 million people in Mecca, and it's dangerous in a way. All these people, crowds, diseases. There have been fires. There was a tragic fire several years ago. They set up tents while they're there for a week, and sometimes people have little heating Bunsen burners, as it were, and there have been some awful situations. But people put up with a lot. People fast. Both Jews and Muslims have laws for fasting. During the month of Ramadan, Muslims fast for a 28-day lunar month from sunup to sundown. No food, no drink, no sexual relations, but they can in the evening. They're able to eat or in the morning. But still, just try not eating for a whole day sometime. It's a pretty high bar. In the case of Jews, they have several fast days. 2 of them are total 25-hour fast days. The one you've heard of is the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur, when Jews don't take any food or drink for a 25-hour period. And the same, there's another holiday called Tisha B'Av in the summer, which commemorates the destruction of the Jewish temples. So, people have these beliefs. I must point out, though, that with respect to fasting, both in Judaism and Islam, if there's any health consideration or travel or pregnancy or anything else, you may not fast. I was ill some years back, and my rabbi said, stop, you may not fast on Yom Kippur because you're not well right now. I was on chemotherapy. I'll get to that later. But so just be aware that you have all these different practices out there. People who hold them as so dear and important to their identity. That's what is so important to realize, I think. Here's the golden rule, and there's this lovely map that shows you how in all these traditions there is some version of the golden rule. You can see that it didn't come out too clearly, but take it on faith, if you will, that the golden rule is there in all these traditions, and that's that core value of justice and love and treating others as you would like to be treated. That's right there at the center of all these religions. That's what gives us some adhesion. Okay, religious beliefs and respect. This kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I wrote an article about the last presidential election in a book chapter, and I was critiquing how the press had covered the candidates and their religion and values, and in particular Romney's Mormonism. And a couple of articles I read sort of said, wow, those Mormons, they've got a lot of whoppers, that they have this notion that Joseph Smith received golden tablets and so forth, and the Garden of Eden is in Missouri, and from the standpoint of more traditional Christians, those seem like unusual ideas. But when you stand back, as I said earlier, you realize that every religion has ideas that on the face of it seem contrary to sort of pragmatic, empirical observation. Things like Jesus being raised from the dead, or ascending into heaven and so forth. But these are matters that people take on faith. And I must say, it's not that you can't make a decent case for why somebody may not have received a revelation from God. It's not a nonsensical idea, but it still is an idea you have to accept on faith. That's the nature of religion. But you know, our whole worldview is based on faith. Even if you don't believe in any God or any higher power, you believe, usually most people do, in the fact that most human beings are basically decent. That you can trust most people, not everybody. There's that 5% sociopathic folks and so forth. You've got to be a little careful. But we all make certain assumptions that are really based on faith, aren't they? Belief in the goodness of human beings, belief in the fact that the human condition, the human family is progressing. Those in their own way are analogous to faith and to the leap of faith that religious people take. So just good to keep that in mind. Coping with illness and death. Well, Christianity, why do people suffer? Why do people get cancer and get heart disease and other terrible maladies? Well, the general view is that somehow God doesn't want these, or sort of say, okay, I'm going to give you cancer, but that the higher power permits a lot of things. We're permitted to do a lot of things because of free will. People can do great evil and great good because they're permitted by the higher power to exercise their free will. Without free will, we're just robots. So the general thinking is that, yes, there will be diseases, but you'll be given the grace, the strength to cope with them. And that in the end, after the whips and scorns of time in this world, that a higher existence, an eternal life awaits people. So that's been a kind of a general Christian view. There's less stress for Jews, except very Orthodox Jews, on afterlife. It's just not as big an item. For most Jews, I think there's kind of a sense that there's a hope that it would be nice if there were an afterlife, but that most Jews don't sort of count on it in the same way that Christians do. That's a fairly major difference. That this might be important in the kind of work you do, to be aware that for, if you were to go into unless the person were Orthodox, and most Jews are not, about 90% of Jews in this country are not Orthodox, more strictly observant Jews, and say, well, I know you're suffering a lot, but you're going to be going to heaven soon. No, wrong. You probably would not make a theological statement like that anyway. But the fact is, be careful, because that afterlife thing differs a lot. And of course, then you have Hindus and Buddhists who believe in reincarnation, that you will be born in a new state in another life, rather than going to a higher state like heaven. What about, so Jews stress the here much more than the hereafter. For Islam, very big focus on the afterlife. Martyrdom is admired, but suicide terror, you hear about somebody blowing himself up. Some of you may have seen the movie Zero Dark 30. It's kind of a heavy-duty film, but it's a very good film, I think. And there's an instance there where an individual was trusted by the CIA, gets into the CIA headquarters in Afghanistan, and blows himself up with about 7 or 8 CIA agents. Well, that's suicide terror. Islam does not condone that. This is religious fanaticism. Okay, this is like the fanaticism that led the Crusaders to kill all kinds of Muslims and Jews when they entered the Holy Land. In fact, they even killed a lot of Eastern Christians on their way into Jerusalem. So fanaticism is another matter. Okay. Eastern views. I've already mentioned that a little bit, that these folks look at evil and suffering through the lens of karma, that what you did in a previous life may have some impact on how you live and how you suffer or don't suffer in the current life. And I must say that we all know about the law of karma, just in the sense that risky behavior in this world means sooner or later, you're going to get yours. If you risky behavior with drugs or with sex or with anything else, probably right now in this life you're going to get some karma back at you. But for Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs as well, there is a notion of a rebirth, and that your next life may be affected by the way you lived your last life. That's their view. Good to mention too that Hinduism has its own like in China too, both Chinese cultural and religious traditions and Hinduism have notions of healing that are different from Western views, and some of them have been acceptable in the West, some not so much. But clearly things like acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine have now been embraced more and more by Western practitioners, and show that we don't know everything about medicine in the West. So as I mentioned, death balanced by reincarnation, so forth. And of course, as I mentioned, Chinese herbal medicine. These are, here you can see how much is out there. And I don't think anybody should be overwhelmed by all this. You know, little by little, you get more experience. As you go into medical practice or public health or dental, you work with people, you do internships, and little by little you begin to pick up more and more about how culture works, how religion works, how people work. And so what I'm doing today is just one little kind of consciousness raiser for you. I'm just trying to give you one little piece in this great course you're taking about the kind of world you're going to be dealing with. Yes, sir?
Speaking of alternative medicine, do you know to what extent osteopathic medicine is incorporating other types of alternative medicine, like Chinese medicine or acupuncture? To what extent do they take ideas from the Eastern world?
I'd say 5%. I mean, in other words, I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek here, but I think that...
How do they pick out, this word?
Yeah. Well, one of them is, and I kind of mentioned this in the FDA, and in medical schools, and researchers look into these practices and decide which one of them seem to sort of pass the bar of do no harm. The Hippocratic oath that this is being used, and clearly acupuncture has been proven to be quite helpful. Just like I'm going to get to meditation in a few minutes, and there's no question that biofeedback and meditation clearly help people get better. Just not any doubt about it. So it's coming. I think Western medicine is still somewhat suspicious of some Eastern practices, but I think there's a greater openness now that, along with a lot of, the National Institute of Health, for example, who test these methods and see if they're, legitimate or not, or safe. Okay, other questions? Anything else at the moment? Yes, ma'am.
Western medicine incorporates what they call evidence-based medicine. So they take these Eastern practices, and if they can find evidence for those having a benefit or
right.
an effect, then I guess they teach those in osteopathy.
That's right. In a way, that's kind of what I was getting at. That's right. It's very much an empirical approach. Okay, here's the practice. Does it work? At the very least, does it do no harm? Does it do some good? Yeah. So and I think that's healthy. So yeah, definitely. Well.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yes. Okay.
So you mentioned about how meditation is known to be working, and how that acupuncture, we know it works well. But can we not argue that could be part of the placebo? Yeah,
it could. Yeah. But the placebo effect may also be working when somebody's doing chemotherapy. I mean, our minds and bodies, our brains and body are so interconnected that the fact that you believe or are confident that a certain regimen, whether it's acupuncture or chemotherapy or whatever, is going to help you, it will be bound to help you some more. Does it mean that it's going to be an instant cure? No, but the placebo effect is powerful. We know that from all kinds of tests that in other words, if your brain and your psyche and your very soul, if you will, believes that something's going to help you, it probably will. But just in and of itself.
Sorry, with chemotherapy and other drugs such as rituximab or whatever you're using, there's biochemical pathways that you're going through, whether it's B cells depletion, whatever it is. There's biochemical pathways that we've studied.
Right.
But with acupuncture or with meditation, these are things we can't study as much because they're interrelated to the psyche directly. So how do you prove, or how do you say that this is not completely placebo?
Okay, for example, there have been studies on Buddhist monks and Christian nuns and Christian monks. They've done brain imaging of their brain waves when they're in meditative state, and they're clear and smooth, and they indicate that the person clearly is in a much more tranquil state. And here's a study I was going to bring up later that I just heard about after we put this PowerPoint together. There was an article in the recent Annals of Family Medicine. They took 150 folks and put them in 3 groups. One group, and they all had bad colds, like some of the ones that are going around this year. And one group was just a control group. They didn't do anything. They just sort of, took 2 aspirin and drank a lot of water and got a lot of rest. And, But another group exercised, during the, I guess actually it was before anything happened, in other words, before a cold came on. So people who did nothing tend to have more severe colds. People who meditated had a much lower rate of infection and much less severe infection, and people who exercised also had almost the same benefit. So if you combine exercise and meditation, it's probably going to have, from this study, it looks like empirically that you get fewer colds and you get over them more quickly. Now this is just one study, and 150 I know is a fairly modest sized group, but...
my justification for that would be based on stress, because the immune system is very interrelated to stress. The more you stress, I think the weaker your immune system, or
Absolutely.
Be hyperactive. So I think people who meditate and exercise usually have lower stress. That's why they could have a more effective immune system.
Sure. It all works together. Exactly. Okay. This slide right here is pretty much self-evident. Okay, meditation. Mindfulness is what it's often called, or paying attention. It's a very prevalent for Hindus and Buddhists, and here are some of the benefits, which segues right into what you were saying. It can increase positive thinking, decrease blood pressure, lower anxiety, relieve chronic pain, improve immune responses and so forth, and even increase prefrontal cortical thickness. By the way, on kind of a related note, studies have shown that if children grow up in a home which is riddled with controversy and violence and fear and uncertainty and people getting shot in the streets and so forth, it affects their cerebral development. It may cause them PTSD as well, but it actually affects the way the brain develops. After all, the brain of children is constantly growing and developing more and more synaptic connections, and that process continues, by the way, until people are in their early 20s. Once again, this brain and the mind that goes with it and this body are one unit. They're not separate at all. We talk about, the mind. Well, the mind is a construct. The mind really is what's going on up here with neurons and synaptic connections zapping back and forth. But the mind is kind of the product of that. It's the result of those snapping synapses, if you will. But it's not some kind of like the mind is way out here or something. No, it's right in here. Just important to keep that in mind. Okay, let me say a word about meditation, which I practice, not as regularly as I should. But just to give you an idea of how easy it can be to meditate, and I'll be a salesman. Give me 10 minutes. One day, every day? Well, okay, that'd be cool. Give me 10 minutes about 3 or 4 days a week. 10 minutes, man, just 10 minutes. And here's what you do. You find a quiet place. If you know how to sit in the lotus position, cool. If not, just sit comfortably. And begin by breathing, just thinking about your breathing. And if you want, you can add a mantra. It can be anything from shalom to love to our Father, anything you want that kind of goes along with it. It can be Hindus and Buddhists have various words, Shanti, for example. Om is the word for peace in Hinduism. So concentrate on the breathing and the word, your mantra. And then, after a couple of minutes of getting yourself settled, then begin to perceive various senses in your body. Think about the fact that as you're sitting in your chair, you can feel your body. You can feel your back against the chair, your legs. You're aware of the body, the feelings of the bodiliness. Okay? And then listen. Listen to the sounds, a bird chirping outside, a plane going over. Just focus on listening, or water running, whatever it might be. Sight, usually when you meditate, you should keep your eyes almost completely closed, not totally. But even then you have light, you see light. And sense of taste is pretty hard to do much with when you're meditating, but so you kind of go through this and kind of get a feeling for the fact that you have all these senses that are at work. And the next thing you do, at least in my regimen, is you begin with your brain, literally, this thing right up here, and you think about relaxing it. This is called by Dr. Hubbard Benson, the relaxation response. You actually think about, focus on your brain and relaxing it. Then focus on your eyes and just relaxing your eyes. And then after several seconds, focus on your jaw and just let your jaw go loose. And then your shoulders. Notice how many people go around like this all day, you know. Oh, geez, I got an exam at 5 o'clock. And, you know, what can I do? Let the shoulders. This is called biofeedback. And so my method, which by no means is you know, the world's greatest, but it's a combination of awareness, bodily sensory awareness, deep breathing, with a mantra, if you will, and then this way of going through your body from head to toe and consciously thinking about relaxing every part of your body. You do that for 10 minutes, and your brain waves will be like this, not like this. So, you know, now there are many ways of meditating, and by no means is my little method here the last word, but believe me, it's really important. This is powerful. If more and more people did this, we'd be a healthier society, it seems to me. Okay, we've got, as a nice demonstration, we have a couple little short videos here that kind of give you some idea of what meditation really is like. So let's take a look at these very quickly here. How about this one's? About 10 minutes, okay.
But thank you for you're offering to help me. I don't know, we'll try. Mathieu is one of the Dalai Lama's personal French interpreters and has been described as the happiest man in the world, a title he finds embarrassing. He's also a trained molecular biologist. And he hadn't just offered to be my personal teacher, he's also very open to the scientific exploration of meditation.
I think really sometimes science is not just a weird thing, it's really giving something very big that concerns me, that concerns my family, that concerns society. And being involved in science research and neuroscience is that precisely studying the effect of meditation, short and long term, on the brain.
That's very exciting.
And so we are not more like lunatics, although I'm a lunatic, but also collaborators. We sort of co-design the protocols.
Okay, let's get this other little short segment here in.
Benefits.
I see.
Scientists check the brain, you know. First, your brain is capable of change. Means your brain can change.
Effectively.
If you are unhappy, but if you meditate, maybe it can change. Second, the best, number one, to make your mind calm, peace, happy, to apply meditation every day, little bit. Third, good for your body, healthy, and good for a lot of disease. And I add one more. The fourth point, good for your life also. Because your mind becomes calm and peace, and you can do more. And also good for learning. If your mind becomes very sensitive, many things, jealous, fighting, then your mind not calm, then you cannot learn much, yeah?
Okay, there's somebody who's practicing this on a daily basis, and I think kind of recapitulated nicely what I was trying to say. Let's see. You might have to help me, Irene. I'm trying to get to the next slide here. Maybe I can just do that now. Good, thank you. Okay, I've already mentioned yoga. Yoga is the kind of yoga that you might do in a college class at UCI or Cal State Fullerton is hatha yoga. It's really the yoga of getting in positions, postures, so that you can actually penetrate the inner mind, the inner soul. So in a way, it's kind of like the vestibule to what real Hindu Vedic meditation is. But in itself, it's very valuable. Just the fact that you can go to a yoga studio and stretch your body in various ways and get relaxed and provide yourself a platform for concentration. So your body is really, really equipped and set up to do deep meditation. But just be aware that yoga, as we think about it, is really postures. But there are many other parts to yoga, the inner part being jnana yoga, J-N-A-N-A, which is the deep meditation which you really penetrate more deeply into your consciousness. It's a wonderful, wonderful regimen. A lot of yoga studios around. You can see, as I've said, some of the things that it's capable of doing. And I would say that either meditation or yoga or I think everybody, you and the patients you're going to have someday, have got to have outlets to take care of your bodies. Because we are our bodies. If this body isn't working, your mind can't work, your spirit can't work. It's just so important. It's holistic. All of these things work together to make you the kind of human being you want to be healthy and happy. Okay, here's a little twin video about yoga.
My name is Karen Sherman, and I'm a senior scientist at PubHlth. I started researching yoga because I actually was quite interested in complementary medicine treatments for back pain. Back pain, as you know, is the number one reason why people search outside of the conventional medical area for some relief. And at the time that I began my work here at PubHlth, there was actually no formal studies that had been published on yoga, no solid research out there at that time, and I thought, wow, this is a natural kind of thing to do, so I jumped on it. So we started, our first yoga study was funded in 2005, and the first thing that we did before we even did the clinical trial is we had to sort of design it. So one of the things that we had to ask ourselves is, what should the yoga intervention look like? And we chose to focus on postures and breathing with some of the relaxation elements explicitly added. We chose to use a style of yoga called Vini yoga. The idea of Vini yoga being that you adapt the posture to the person. So how are you going to design your study? What are you going to compare it to? So we said, well, there's really two things we're very interested in. One is, how does it compare to usual care? That is to say, what people would normally do. And we augmented our usual care with a self-care book, and that was sort of a basic standard of comparison. And then we were just curious, how is yoga different from sort of conventional exercise? I have to say that back pain researchers often find that nothing works, so I was actually surprised that yoga did work. It was clearly superior to usual care at all time points, and it was better than the exercise at a couple of time points. Not enormously better, but statistically significant and intriguing.
Okay, very fascinating. All right, let me try this one.
Postures. They're only one part of yoga. Today, there are 15 million yogis in India. To us, yoga is our whole life. Yoga encompasses many ways to reach oneness with the divine. Many Westerners practice just a sliver of this living tradition. What can Westerners learn from us, the yogis of India? We live just as the ancient mystics did, 5,000 years ago. Yoga was passed down by our forefathers through scriptures, songs and fables. Yoga means to join, yoke, to link with the divine. We leave the world to do this. We give up everything.
Wow.
My whole work over the past 30 years has been talking about the missing link in Western yoga.
Okay, good. Good. So, you know, you can see how much these people can accomplish. Now, most of us are not going to become full-time yogis or Buddhist monks, but we can imbibe some of the wisdom that we find in these traditions in our own lives and make our lives so holistically so much more healthy. Okay, some other practices as we kind of begin to wind this down. Fasting. There isn't much of a tradition of fasting in Christianity, although there certainly is among Christian monks. Roman Catholic and monks and nuns have had fasting regimens, certainly, especially cloistered nuns and Cistercian monks and so forth. But most traditions have some kind of fasting. It can have health benefits, and I'll say this, that in my own experience, when you fast for 25 hours or from all day long, you really get a sense of how vulnerable and dependent you are on nature and on other people, the people who provide food. I mean, we're so used to saying, well, if you're hungry, just go to In-N-Out Burger, you know, and just it's fast, it's all right there. But the fact is, we are so fragile. If we don't eat for a few days, we sort of begin to curl up in a ball and die. You know, every day we have to eat, we have to drink, we have to sleep. We're biological beings, and fasting can make us very aware of our dependence, our humility, our appreciation for all the people that help us get the food we eat. The people that pick the crops, boy, they deserve more credit than they get, I'll tell you that. I picked berries as a kid, and I didn't have to. I mean, I was from a middle-class family, and nobody said, you got to go out and pick berries. But I did, because it was fun. And there were a lot of very cute girls that went out there to pick berries, too. That was kind of a nice, fringe benefit. But the fact is, that's really hard work. You got people that gather fruit, that prepare food, that haul it to grocery stores, that cook it. This whole chain makes us so appreciative, or should. And of course, it has real benefits as well. Then there's the notion of confession. Interestingly, in the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox traditions, there is an actual rite of confession to a priest. But the fact is, a lot of people confess to a therapist, to a psychiatrist, maybe to an attorney. The notion of getting something out and talking things out is just extremely mentally healthy, as we all know. Very, very, very beneficial. Then there's prayer. And prayer also, like meditation, can have real benefits. Now, if you don't believe in any kind of higher power, then I suppose you can commune with nature in some way. I mean, after all, it seems to me that even if one doesn't believe in a God or some kind of higher power, the fact that there is anything, that there is a world, this complex world we live in. I mean, just take this bottle. I mean, here's water, and the water is just teeming with molecules and atomic and subatomic particles. The same with the plastic, the same with the table. The table looks like it's inert. The table is just full of life. It's full of subatomic particles. It's got something now we just identified called Higgs boson, something that we think actually holds material things together. Sometimes called the God particle. Okay, that's just a metaphor, but it's important to at least have that awareness about existence, that we're part of this incredible stream of existence. Here we are in a world which is in a solar system with various planets and the sun, the moon, Jupiter, Mars, and so forth. And we're part as well of a Milky Way galaxy. In that galaxy, there are something like 300 billion stars, suns, and each sun, of course, has satellites, planets around it. And we know there are at least 150 billion galaxies. So you get a sense of just the immense expansiveness of the universe. And just to stand in wonder at that is a kind of a prayer, whether you believe in God or not. So people have their own prayer regimens. A lot of them include kind of an awareness of the immensity of life or of an actual God. Thankfulness, just being thankful for everybody in your life that's ever been good to you. I mean, just think now, how many teachers and parents and people have helped you along the way this far? A whole bunch, I'm sure, a whole bunch. So there's thankfulness, there's awareness, there's remembrance of people who died, who you loved, to think about grandparents just for a minute, who are no longer in your lives perhaps. And then to kind of think, how can I be a better individual tomorrow? There's a lot of ways, and of course there's more formal prayer. You can pray the Psalms, you can pray all kinds of prayers, the Jewish, Christian, all these traditions have lovely prayers. And it can be an important kind of part of life. So something to keep in mind. I'm not suggesting that you lead any of your patients in prayer, but if somebody wants to pray, then make it possible. Get them a rabbi, get them a priest, help them to do what they want to do. And if you can facilitate that or make it easier for them to be healthy enough or upright enough to pray, wonderful. Okay, some case studies here, very briefly. I have a friend named Don, a very close friend, a concert violinist, wonderful fellow. Diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2005. And he began by trying all kinds of, alternative, naturopathic remedies. He had been very much into Vedantic religion anyway, something called the Self-Realization Society. So he began using this whole constellation of methods, yoga, acupuncture, chiropractic, and so forth, a modified diet, and he decided to decline a disabled parking pass. Why do you suppose he did that? Anybody know? Well, he could have gotten one. I mean, here he has Parkinson's disease. It's a serious disease. This is what Michael J. Fox has, who's one of my heroes, by the way. What an incredible guy he is. How courageous. Why no parking pass? Anybody have a guess? Okay, my man, you're...
I imagine that thought of being sick, I feel like when you tell yourself, okay, I'm sick, I'm disabled, that thought being in your mind makes you be even more sick. Like to me, I feel like if I wake up every day for the rest of my life saying, okay, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, eventually one day I'm going to become what I think. So I think maybe it's like your mind translating into matter. So maybe it's saying, oh, if I don't if I don't think I'm sick, then, or if I don't keep it in my mind all the time, then maybe it won't affect me as much.
maybe he'll make this concession to, yes.
I'm also thinking that he's seeing what he has not as a disability, but maybe as a blessing even. And so instead of having something that makes him or reminds him that it's a disability, he's trying to keep that away.
That's right, absolutely.
And instead making the most out of it.
Hey, absolutely, that's very much the case.
And this called denial. I mean, if his condition is deteriorating and according to, I don't know, physiological, neurological examination, he really is disabled. How much more can you tell yourself?
Okay, good point. I think there's a delicate balance between, kind of fighting against the disease and not letting it take away too much, and yet being very, I mean, he's clearly goes to a neurologist. He's doing Western medicine along with his other techniques, so he's balancing them. But, you got to, I mean, like Michael J. Fox, he really has, he's serious because he's constant shaking. He has to, to work on it so much, and he takes medication and so forth. But, I mean, Don is just an instance of a guy who really kind of got proactive. Now, let me tell you what happened to Don recently. A certain sort of a combination of events began to happen. First of all, his father-in-law was dying of cancer, and boy, those last weeks when somebody is struggling between life and death are really hard in the family. I went through this with my mother and dad, with my mother-in-law, and it's really hard. There's guilt, and you don't know what the heck to do, and so he had all this going on. The father-in-law was on the point of death. His son was threatening to commit suicide, and his sister-in-law was becoming more and more disabled. She'd been a professor, and she began to have terrible health problems. And he found that in those weeks, he had to start using a cane again. He'd been, just like with the parking, disabled parking pass, he was trying not to ever use a cane. He found he had to use the cane. And then he began to realize, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And things got better on the home front with all these challenges, but he also kind of just, putting himself back into gear, kind of reset the button and tried to get himself going again, and now he's doing much better. I mean, Parkinson's is a ineluctable disease. He's not going to be cured, but he's doing the best he can, and it's amazing, again, how proactive one can be by using what I call the full court press. Everything you can get in your arsenal, use it. Okay, I don't want to go too long here. Let's see. Let's see if this is right.
Didn't really,
Good.
have
Great, thanks.
what I was going to say, I just knew I had to go. I just remember, it just came out, and all these things from past years and years and years, I just remember literally crying, just for the amazing grace that God had blessed me with that day. I think that, Father Mark and Father Matt, in confession, they're doing so much more than just uniting you with some present that you really want. They're bringing you to God.
Yeah, so again, it's, you got to talk to somebody. We all have to talk. Got to get it out, whatever it happens to be. Whether it's sin, sorrow, anxiety, you got to get it out. Okay. So.
The ultimate gift is God's forgiveness.
Good, okay. Our case study number 2 is of myself, and I just don't want to, just one guy here, but I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 1995. I had surgery to remove the tumor and a year of chemotherapy. And at first I thought, I'm a tough guy, I'm going to beat this on my own. So my wife then said, well, there's a cancer support group at Hoag Hospital. I'm going. You want to join? So she sort of shamed me into going. It turned out to be the best thing I ever could have done. I got tremendous support from the other folks. I realized a lot of other folks were going through the same thing I was going through. Chemotherapy is not exactly a picnic. And studies have shown that if a control group has cancer, comparable cancer for example, and doesn't go to a support group versus a experimental group who does in fact go to a support group, the chances of full recovery are considerably greater for the group that was in the support group. So once again, that's not chemotherapy when you're sitting there on Thursday night talking to people, but it is therapy, and it affects the brain, which affects the body. That's the way we work. That's the way we're wired, and that's what happened to me. I tried to use the full court press. In fact, I was told, take a leave of absence. Don't teach this semester. I said, to hell with that. I love teaching. I hope you can tell that. And so I kept on teaching. Fortunately, that semester I had a little lighter load too. I'd had a heavier load the first semester, and that was nice. We didn't have quite as heavy a schedule. I kept teaching. People were praying for me, which I'm not altogether sure that I think that prayer is directly efficacious, but there was one instance where I ran into the president of our university on campus, and he said, well, how's it going, Ben? Well, I said, well, actually, Dr. Gordon, I'm kind of having a little bout with colon cancer. And he said, I'll pray for you. Wow, here's a college president, you know, and I'm just a guy on campus, and he's going to pray for me. And that alone was life-affirming. Wow. He and my sister and my parents, everybody cared about me. My grandchildren, my kids. I mean, that alone was great. And so somehow I got through it, and I'm totally through with colon cancer. It's gone. It was so gone that I was able to start giving blood donations again. So even the medical professor said, hey, you're cured, man. Now, please be aware, cancer is a very subversive disease. And we all have free radicals in our body that can spring into action as cancer, given a certain motivation, a certain environmental situations like bad air or whatever. But anyway, that was my story, and I just humbly say that it seems to me that it was a case of using medicine and all kinds of other means to overcome something that was pretty serious. Yes?
Right, thank you, Doctor. Doctor, listening to your story and what you were talking about previously, about therapy and meditation, yoga, I feel like they're dealing a lot with intangible aspects of health. And it's very different from, when you go to a doctor's office and he looks for certain symptoms and then he prescribes medicine. This is not exactly that clear-cut. This is more intangible than that. And I would want to ask you, is that should doctors, be delving into that intangible realm and be prescribing?
That's a really, really good question. To what extent should the medical practitioner be suggesting yoga or meditation or prayer or whatever? I think delicately that, a lot of it I think is more going to come from counselors, spiritual counselors, or a rabbi or people that are directly like chaplains, and so those sorts of folks. I think a doctor has to tread quite carefully. But if you know the patient well and know what their religious background is, then it might be appropriate to say, well, you might want to talk to a rabbi or a priest about this to get some strength. But again, one has to be careful. But I think it's not out of the question. You could sort of refer. I don't think it's the doctor's role to be teaching anybody how to practice meditation, but it might at least put them in touch with somebody who can help them with meditation or imaging or biofeedback. Okay, yes, ma'am, please.
I was just wondering, what is your opinion about integrated medicine?
Well, I'm by no means an authority on this, but as I understand it, it really is very much along the lines of what we've been talking about here, namely that you bring to bear various strands in medicine to again have this kind of full court press where you you're using the best of Western medicine, integrated with a regimen of diet, exercise, group therapy, whatever it might be. That's what it means to me. It means that really every arrow in the quiver that you can put together. Obviously what doctors do, I mean, the medical profession is a wonderful profession. When you think of what medicine's accomplished in this country in the last 100 years, it's just unbelievable, really, what we've done. But it's not enough, because the spirit and the mind also have to be a part of the picture. And that's where I think counseling and therapy and friends and meditation and joy, just having as much joy as you can in your life. Laughing. When I was on chemotherapy, I subscribed to a magazine called Funny Times. And it was a kind of a monthly digest of all the best jokes and cartoons. I love political cartooning. And it's, you know, or watch an episode of Seinfeld. That's going to sound really dumb, but I still find Seinfeld to be, and reruns, to be really funny. Or Saturday Night Live. You know, that's integrated medicine. Let yourself laugh more. I mean, laughter is incredibly curative. It really is. So, that's kind of how I see it. Let's see. I think we're almost. Yeah. I mean, just very quickly here, and then we'll take your questions. I think that spirituality, in the broadest sense of the term, not necessarily theistic spirituality, very often it will be that, where God or a higher power is in the picture, but some kind of spiritual life. I mean, I've told people, you can say you're an atheist, an agnostic, you have no religious tradition, but everybody has a spiritual life. Anybody who can go look at a sunset or go to the ocean or think about the wonders of nature, my little example of a molecule, or look under a microscope at life teeming in a test tube, that's a spiritual experience. And we need as many of those as we can get. So I think it's important for practitioners to be as conversant as they can. And as I said, it's a click away. So let's say a doctor says, well, there's a Sikh patient going to see you. You know, you can get out your smartphone and look up Sikhism and have a pretty good idea what Sikhism is in about 5 minutes. No, you're not going to know the whole Sikh tradition, but you're going to know enough to have a little more sensitivity to why this man comes in. He's wearing a turban. Why is he wearing a turban? Why doesn't he let his hair grow? And so forth. To add that little bit of extra dimension to your care as a physician of this individual. You can't do everything all the time, but you can certainly try and be more aware. That's the key. Respect, awareness, thoughtfulness, sensitivity. All those are qualities that make a great doctor or a great health practitioner, along with being a really good practitioner in the practical nuts and bolts of the trade, which is, of course, indispensable. Well, I think I'll stop there, and we'll take some other questions. I think that's pretty well does it. So some references here for you. Thank you. Okay, so, my best man here.
Going back to Umer's question, how he asked, to what extent should a doctor prescribe the intangibles or the like group therapy, or what's the danger of a doctor telling his patient you should meditate, or you should, how is that any different from telling a patient you should take some aspirin? Like, if you do believe that it truly works, then why can't you, like, I feel like you should do that at your own discretion. You shouldn't be scared to tell a patient. I don't see how it could offend someone's beliefs, how you could tell someone meditate, or
I don't either.
Do it discreetly. Or
I don't really. Yeah, I think the key is discretion and knowing when that would be appropriate and when it would not be appropriate. Some people just might be not want to listen to anything like that. But you know, for some people especially in end of life situations where they can be helped by a combination of palliative care, hospice care, and so forth. So I think it has to be done with kid gloves. I think you're going to have to be really careful. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it can, to tell a patient who's terribly anxious that relaxation therapy can be extremely helpful. I mean, psychiatrists do that, isn't it? This is not, you know, some great secret that Ben Hubbard just gave you today. So anyway, handle with care, but yes, I think it's appropriate, as long as it's done very carefully. Yes, and then the lady up there, but yes.
So this neurosurgeon, they go to the name of David Levy. Before every single one of his surgery procedures, he asks all his patients, no matter what their background is, to pray with him. I was wondering, what do you think about that? Is it appropriate? And he's a really renowned physician. He was on UCI's campus.
You mean when somebody comes in for a doctor-patient visit?
Yeah, every single prayer procedure, he asks the patient to pray with him. And he's the most prayer matters. And so, yes, I was just wondering, that's appropriate.
Well, I don't know. I know enough about. I mean, if by prayer you mean, let's both of us. Let's say you're the patient, I'm the doctor. Let's both of us just be silent for a minute here, and just think about our private thoughts here about what might help us go forward.
He vocalizes it, so he'll lead the prayer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he'll vocalize it, no matter who the.
I take it it's a pretty non-denominational prayer, though. I mean, he must be.
I'm not sure exactly what the prayer
Yeah,
is, but
yeah. Well, I'd like to talk to him about, what the prayer is. I mean, this could be tricky. I don't know whether he's Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or whatever it is, but I think if it were really generic and yet heartfelt, that we're here together, we're hoping that the regimen I'm going to put you on is going to be effective. I care about your well-being. I think there are higher powers that can help. But what if the individual came in as an atheist, just has no religious belief? That might be a turn-off. So maybe I could learn more about this individual. I mean, he may be a wonderful physician, but that's about as much as I can say. I think it's a little tricky, in my opinion. Is somebody up? Yes, Dean. Yes.
If I'm an atheist and the doctor tells me higher power, I would probably feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But there is a long history of religious organizations owning hospitals. Hogue is an example, St. Jude, St. Joseph's.
Right.
They're all over. In fact, that used to be what religions do, schools and hospitals.
Right.
And to what extent, in your experience or knowledge, do these hospitals discriminate against those who are not of the same religious persuasion? So if this surgeon, for example, is used to seeing patients who are also from the same church, then there is no objection. They both, but it's when these hospitals that are based in religion cater to the general public or paying public that we could have potential conflict.
Yeah, I
don't know how often that happens.
I don't think that normally happens. For one thing, most of these hospitals are getting government funding, and so there can't be any proselytizing. And I think that most doctors are very aware of how diversified their patient population is. And it is true that, for example, at St. Joseph's of Orange, abortions are not performed. It's a Catholic hospital, so no abortions. And I don't think birth control can be prescribed either, artificial contraceptives, that is. So there's kind of these borderline, big things like that. But I don't, and it's true too that there are chaplains around, although at many hospitals there's actually a rabbi, a priest, a minister, there's kind of a whole group, because I think the feeling of most hospitals and doctors is that whatever the individual's religion, whether he's a Catholic like the hospital which sponsors this, it's important for him to have some kind of counseling. So I think most of them are quite careful about all this, but there are a few of these big areas, like with abortion, for example, where the hospital has an official policy, and if you want an abortion, you've got to go someplace else. So.
And is that tied to their non-profit? No, because I'm imagining that they're expressing some right, but is that right embedded in some federal law? If they're receiving federal funding, could they still deny somebody?
Yeah, that's one of those interesting First Amendment clashes between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, thank you. And I think in general that the hospital cannot pressure people to sort of accept Jesus, for example, before you get any, or pray or whatever, or put any pressure on them to convert. But I think they can. That would be really an infringement. But at the same time, they can have certain reasonable rules on what they will or will not do. That's a really interesting legal question, actually. And it's come up recently with the whole contraceptive business. Obamacare, which is actually called the Affordable Care Act, and Patient Prevention Act, ran into some trouble when they said that contraception would be provided in the new law to Catholics who work in a Catholic hospital or university like Loyola Marymount. And then Obama and his people in Sebelius, his Secretary of Health, have backed off and said, okay, what we'll do is we won't ask the Catholic organization to violate its corporate conscience if the church officially is opposed to contraception, but we'll have it done separately, completely separate from the church's or work itself. Yeah, it's one of these delicate church-state things, but I think those are some of the ways people try to handle these things. Well, there was a hand up here a while back, but it's okay if not. Yes?
Does motivation affect those effects of meditation and yoga that we saw? So for meditation, I have increased positive thinking, lower depression, lower BP. Does the motivation of starting yoga change how much your BP will go down?
Well, it probably does, in the sense that you've got to kind of come to this with some prior mindset or kind of self-esteem factors, various psychological factors that would make you even think about doing anything in addition to just going to the doctor and having chemotherapy, for example. Got to have some sort of subtle influences that make you open to the idea. I mean, there are some people who just don't want any part of anything other than just, straight medicine, for example. So yeah, I think it's a factor. And, there's only so much that can be done for some folks. Some people, it's their whole personality. Some people are very optimistic. I think in my case, I'm kind of a crazy optimist, and I really thought I was going to get better, damn it. I just, that's kind of the way I looked at it. It's not going to get me down. And my friend Don, too, who was dealing with this really life-altering disease. So, yeah, a lot of it does depend on one's personality. Yeah, good point. Yes?
All right, so you mentioned earlier how some religious beliefs interfere with, saying getting a blood transfusion, or certain, so a lot of things I've heard of, getting a pig valve is implanted in you because it's not kosher or something like that. So there's a lot of medical procedures that can't be done because they conflict with the religious views. How do you deal with a patient that it's telling you, no, I'm putting my religious view before my health? How do you deal with that?
Well, that's a huge one, and it really comes up especially, not so much with the pig valve. I think that the rabbis have said that the pig valve is not eating a pig. It's an instrumentality, but blood transfusions are trickier with Jehovah's Witnesses, but they're trying to work around that. But the real big problem is Christian Science. Christian Science, by the way, not to be confused with Scientology. Completely different, okay? The word science is there, but Christian Science as a religion was founded by a woman named Mary Baker Eddy at the latter part of the 19th century. And her basic view was that we heal ourselves. Okay, she kind of went back to the New Testament and saw Jesus as kind of a faith healer. And, I know that term, kind of gets a bad rap these days, like people like Benny Hinn, in other words. Some of these faith healers kind of wonder, what's really going on? But anyway, I don't mean to cast aspersions on Benny Hinn. He may do some good things. But anyway, the point is that, the faith healing thing is, I got a lot, give me the I think I kind of lost my train of thought here. Tell me again. So I kind of got off track a little bit.
How do you deal with a patient that's going to tell you, that's going to put their religious view before their health?
Yeah, right. Christian Science. Thank you. And these folks have said that they will accept no medications or traditional medical healing. If I had a woman who was a Christian Scientist who lived down the block from me, she contracted a form of blood cancer, and she died. But they have healers. They have people who come in and pray over individuals for healing. Now, that's a person's right if you're an adult. If you decide that healing is all faith healing, that you get these prayer ministers who would come in and pray with you, and you refuse medication. By the way, the one exception usually is if you break a bone. The feeling is that if you just set the bone, then nature will take its course. But their view is that if you have a cold, nature will take its course, and eventually, your antibodies will fight off the bacteria, and you'll get better. So the problem is with children. What do you do with a Christian Science child who has leukemia, for example? And here it really gets sticky. Some states actually provide an exemption. I meant to do some research on this, I just didn't have time. Massachusetts, the religion began in Massachusetts. And I think in that state and some others, that even children can be exempted from having, traditional medical care, children of Christian Scientists. And what's interesting about Christian Science is that, to go back to everything I've said today in a certain way, the mind and the power of your mind to heal you is there. They've taken this, it seems to me, with all due respect, to kind of an extreme. They've said only the mind and prayer are in the picture, not traditional medicine. I've been trying to say that traditional medicine and the mind are part of the solution. So they're kind of a special case. The fact is they don't usually go to doctors, so normally you would not see these kinds of folks. Now, I must say, it's like many other things. People in borderline situations, it's one thing to have a bad cold, like a flu or something, and just say, okay, I'm going to tough it out and pray and have a prayer minister come in. But, if you've got cancer, for example, then sometimes somebody might say, well, who knows? But I will say, in all due respect, they really take this quite seriously. They are a small religion. They're only about, I think, something like 250,000 Christian Scientists in the United States. So it's you're not likely to encounter them, especially because they don't usually go to doctors. But did that answer your question?
So, okay, I think I need so as a physician, practically, to what extent do you try to convince them? Or do you try to convince them in the first place? So do you try to tell them, look, I'm looking, as a physician, I'm trying to look for your help first. I understand you have these beliefs, but I think doing this procedure will help you. And the way I would approach it personally is I'd kind of use my own religious beliefs, which is, I know it's a little bit risky. So what I would say is, I think God gave us the tools of medicine to use. So I would say that God put us on earth to praise His name. So if you live longer, you'll get to praise God's name more, and you're using His tools. So that's how I would approach my patient. But I don't know if that's a good way to look at it. Or how do you try to convince
them? Yeah, that's, again, one of these really delicate, tough questions. But I think there's nothing wrong with saying, well, I'd like to cure you. I'd like to heal you. And I have this to offer. I can offer you chemotherapy. I can offer you a heart bypass surgery, whatever it might be. And then the next step that you said that you believe that God wants you to live longer, you might want to phrase it more that it seems to me that you and your family would like to see you have a healthy life. So again, it's one of these things where it takes a lot of skill, and the kind of thing that you as physicians and practitioners are going to develop, just how to deal with people, interpersonal skills that take a long time to develop, where you know just how far to go and just what to say. But clearly, you're in the business of healing. And if you can convince somebody that medicine will help them, I think you can go, you can push that line fairly far. without saying, if you don't have this treatment, you're going to go die and go to hell. You know, I mean, no, you know, it's wrong. Well, okay, I don't want to overstay my welcome here. I think we're kind of out of time. Are we okay? Okay, all right. So, what's class end? 6:45? Is that when class ends?
Yeah, we can end whenever we're done, I guess. So
okay.
I'm very interested in population health, and we would take any kind of intervention if it works. You know, we put chlorine in water because it works on most people. Do you know of any evidence that certain kinds of religious peoples are healthier than other religious people? And you know, if there is such evidence, has there been studies on what they do that could benefit everyone?
That's really quite a question. Yeah, I don't think I really have a very good answer. I do know that diet can have a great effect. I mean, a diet which is higher, like the Japanese diet, or the diet of people living in Nepal. There are certain countries and certain kinds of people who do physical exercise all their lives, like Russian peasants, tend to live longer. There's these kind of classic systems here, people.
But as far as religion and whether one religious tradition has a better record, I just don't know. That really is. This I will say. Life expectancy for Mormons is higher than the American average. There you go. And the reason for that is Mormons, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't gamble, they don't mess around. No, I'm kidding. They're wonderful people. Okay, they really are. And living a wholesome life. By the way, Mormons fast once a month. I didn't know that till recently. They have a monthly fast day. They kind of, if I may say so, they're kind of Mitt Romney like. I mean, not that I don't mean the rich part, but Anthony Zeno is a guy who's loves his wife. He has 5 apparently really fine children. He's an honest, decent human being. The Mormon lifestyle seems to be very helpful to good health. And that's kind of amazing, I think, yeah. I'll try to think about those examples. That one really does, there's really absolute empirical evidence on that one, for sure. Yes? Mm-hmm.
When do you actually have to use religion, and how often do you feel like you have to keep in awareness of other people's faith, during your practice? I feel like it's right now I feel like this era is very, very secular. So
okay, remember, I'm not a physician. I'm a professor of comparative religion who has an abiding interest. That's okay. Let me answer that question as I think a physician might. I think any physician or dentist or chiropractor or whatever certainly comes from somewhere, some kind of background. And at the very least, it's usually a loving background, that they love and care about their patients. And so I can't really answer your question except to say that most health practitioners are grounded in some kind of moral principles, along with the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, that impel them to do the most they can for their patients. I mean, the man that I went to for chemotherapy is a doctor named Louis Vandermolen. You might know that. He's one of the best oncologists in Orange County. And, here's this guy, day in and day out, he sees just tons of patients and is kind and caring and professional. And so I would think that the basic ethos and life view of a physician is going to come through. And, not every doctor is a hero, but, I think many of them really have at least kind of a sense of of loving compassion for their patients. And that's why they're in it. So that's what I would say from my own standpoint, just more as a patient than as a physician. Okay, good. Other, yes, Irene.
Well, earlier in your presentation, you kind of divided up, like when you were talking about different religions, you divided into Eastern and Western. And I'm guessing that those religions have different views on like suffering and death and sickness. How would you say that is reflected in the ways that practitioners of those religions approach medicine?
You mean a medical doctor who's a Hindu or a Buddhist or a?
Oh, I meant like a patient.
Oh yeah, well, I talked a teeny bit about that before, in saying that for some, there may be this karmic sense that the situation I'm in was caused by forces from another life or another experience and so forth, and that I kind of have to a certain extent, accept reality as as it is. But to some extent, that's true of every tradition. Some of you may be aware of a philosopher who was a Holocaust survivor named Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, F-R-A-N-K-L, Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Logotherapy, and he said, in the concentration camp, you were completely, in one sense, at the mercy of the Gestapo, of the Auschwitz managers, as it were. But the one thing they couldn't take away from you is your right to respond to what you're going through. That's, and the same with illness. The cancer may be in your body, your heart might be hurting, but in a certain sense, you kind of have a sense that the sickness has overtaken you. But the one thing that can't be taken away is my ability to respond to this. I have free will. I can still make a response. So I think in some ways that ties East and West together. But clearly, I think a lot of Christians, for example, would say that suffering can be, it's God's will, it's a way of making me stronger, it's a way of pruning me with love, if you will. Just like, fruit trees are pruned, God is testing me, pruning me, making me a stronger person. So people will try to make something positive out of it, for example. In the East, it might be just more a sense that this is the way of life. These are the rhythms of life. That there are certain things about life that are just inevitable. Tectonic plates are going to cause earthquakes. Weather patterns are going to cause storms and hurricanes. Bacteria and viruses are going to cause sickness. It's there. And so we deal with it and we respond to it as best we can. So, clearly karma is there, but my sense is, and my Buddhist colleagues might be able to help me a bit on this, but that there's a sense in which they might say, yes, there are factors that might go back to a prior life, but the fact is I'm here now, and I've got to respond to this. And I can use all kinds of techniques from my own Buddhist tradition or Hindu tradition, but that I've kind of got to end up just dealing with it the same way anybody in the world does. So that's how I see it. I'm not sure that's really a totally adequate answer, but I think that's along those lines, we all kind of have to just face reality. Life is the way it is. We're given certain bodies and minds and certain sicknesses and wellnesses, and we kind of just live with them as best we can. And spiritual practices can be helpful. Again, whether it's formally going to church every week or praying every morning, it's the idea of having a spiritual life, a life filled with wonder about how incredible this world is at its best. Sure, it's got a lot of rotten aspects as well, really rotten. There's some rotten people in the world too, and there's some rotten places like Syria right now. Not the people, the Civil War, 60,000 people having died. Life can be really pretty tough. But this sense of kind of having a balance in life through spirituality, I think is important. So, yes?
I just wanted to add on to that question. You mentioned a lot about how spirituality helps people get through struggling, and I just wanted to know
for people who are spiritual and don't believe in like the afterlife or incarnation, like you mentioned Judaism, but usually they don't.
Yeah.
What is like? How do they get through struggling?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay. I think in general that the Jewish view would be summed up in the phrase l'chaim. In other words, life. This is the life we have. We live it as fully as we can. When it's over, it's over. Most Jews would say, and I don't mean to be flip about this, but at all, but it kind of like, well, I don't really believe in an afterlife, but it sure would be nice. You know, in other words, if it turns out there is an afterlife, wonderful. But just kind of a sense that we've been given a life, we live it as fully as we can, and when it's over, it's over. And in fact, for everybody, at some point, it's over. Even if you believe in reincarnation or going to heaven or whatever, this life is over. This wonderful mix of good and bad, sol y sombra, light and dark, this whole concatenation of life that we all live is there, we live it, and then it's done. And where do you go? Well, maybe you go nowhere. Maybe you go to an afterlife, a heaven, or a higher plane of existence. Maybe you're reborn. But at least we all have in common, we have this life to live as fully as we can, and then it's over. And Jews just put more stress on the fact that the here is more important than the hereafter. And by no means does that mean to be a denigration of the hereafter. For a lot of people, the hereafter can be a tremendous comfort. For example, you lose a child. Whew, boy, you know, that's about as bad as it gets. Are you ever going to, or your parents, are you going to see them again? I mean, you know, I'd love to somehow be able to see my parents again. There are things I'd like to tell them, you know, that I didn't tell them. And I do that in a way when I have my little evening walks and so forth. Are they hearing? Who knows? But anyway, it's pretty much that for life thing that's there. And I suppose some people say, well, maybe the Christians get more comfort compared to a Jewish skeptic about afterlife. But I think both of them kind of have to look back and say, well, I had this life, I did the best we can, I could, we'll see what happens. You know, that's about all that one can do. Okay, yes?
This is more just a question about the nuances of the Jewish religion. Depending on where you're from, like Sephardic or Ashkenazi, does that like affect your view on the afterlife? Like, is the skepticism about the afterlife a Jewish thing as a whole, or is it like affected by your roots, whether you're
Well, okay, let me put it this way. Across the board, Orthodox Jews, the most traditional Jews, do have a stronger belief in an afterlife. But they only represent about 10-15% of Jews worldwide. So in many ways, after all, Paul, the Apostle Paul, was a rabbi. And he articulated in his letter to the Corinthians the notion of an afterlife. So that idea has been in Judaism, you know, before Christianity came along. But for most Jews, it's just not a big item. It's just there's not a lot of focus on afterlife. Even though I think secretly a lot of people would like to have it happen. But I'm Jewish, so I talk to a lot of Jewish people in my life. I teach some classes at my synagogue, and for a lot of people, it's, you know, I don't really know that I can accept it, the Jewish person might say, but I sure like it to be the case. But in point of fact, for most Jews, they're kind of agnostic on afterlife. Just don't know. Well, I think we're out of time, so I don't want to keep it too long.
This is a card that we all signed for you.
Oh my gosh.
And a DIM shirt as an expression of our gratitude.
All right. Oh, thank you very much. This is great. It was just a great experience. I thank you. Lovely.
Dr. Hubbard has kindly agreed to stay after a couple minutes if anyone has any more questions. And 2 announcements. Don't forget to do the surveys. They are mandatory. And next week we'll have a speaker come and talk about LGBT health. So I hope to see you there.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful.